Okay, everybody, this is chapter 8 in your Irony of Democracy book. We're going to talk a little bit about the legislative elite that makes up Congress. So, usually these people that make up Congress have some type of political entrepreneurship attached to them. They're usually drawn from well-educated, prestigiously employed, affluent, upper middle class backgrounds. Generally, these people are going to be career politicians, meaning a lot of them never really had a job outside of Congress. And in some instances, a lot of these members of Congress are career politicians. And in a sense that also kind of, relies on this is that some of these people have professional backgrounds such as being a lawyer. And think about it. Being a lawyer is advantageous in what ways? We've talked a little bit about this before. You know the law, right? You can tell what you need to accomplish in a law, and you need to know the ways of policy and procedure. But I think also more importantly, you also kind of know how to circumvent the law, which is a key thing, right? You know how to circumvent the law, and that is a big deal and a big kind of advantage of being an attorney, right? So, generally, European American males have long kind of dominated the congressional ranks. But if we look at it now, the numbers have really changed. Were they we want it to be? Probably not. But are they better than what they've been maybe even 10 years ago? Absolutely. We have 56 African Americans in the House, 2 in the Senate. We have 48 Latino members of Congress, 15 Asian Americans, 126 women in the House and in the Senate. And then the mean age is about 57 years old. So, a little bit older population as well. But, we've really made inroads on this. So if we look at party numbers right now, the House of Representatives is made up of 232 Democrats, 197 Republicans, and currently 1 independent with 5 vacant seats. You can see the Senate is 53 Republican, 45 Democrat with 2 independents, but those 2 independents generally will at a lot of the times caucus with the Democrats. Okay, so one thing that we know about party, and one thing that I'm going to want you to remember for this class is that in the course of the time between 1933 and 1994, partyship generally stayed, or the control of the House generally stayed, and control of the Congress generally stayed with the Democrats. Now, what we see, especially in the 21st century, is that a lot of these control goes back and forth, right? Because, for example, just recently in 2018, the House of Representatives was Republican, a Republican majority, but the Democrats won the majority in the midterm elections. So, before that, Obama had a majority Democrats in the House in 2012. 2014, that went to Republican control, right? So just some examples of that. So we look at personal wealth, and this is one of the more interesting topics with regards to Congress. The average personal wealth of a member of Congress is about $900,000. If we look at a senator, it's about $2.8 million. So that's net wealth, right? Personal wealth. If we look at this website, there's some interesting things, and I kind of want to draw your guys' attention to some of these. If we look at these, and we can see this website is called opensecrets.com, and we've referred to this website before, and I want you guys to go ahead and look at this again. If you look at what we see here, the current, in 2016, this isn't really that current, but in 2016, we could see that the richest member of Congress was a gentleman named Darrell Issa, who was actually the representative up in the North County. net worth of $323 million. Now, he didn't make all that from politics. He had a car alarm business that was very lucrative to him, and he was able to make his money off of there. But I think one of the more interesting things is if we go to this case, if you look at this page, it has the richest member of Congress, the poorer members of Congress. But then one of the more telling stats is, look at this, personal growth, or wealth. The growing of wealth. If we look at Bob Corker here, his net wealth has raised from $32,000 to $69 million over the course of the time that he's been in the Senate. And you can see that's a 213,592.4% increase. So that is a very, very significant raise. All right, so I'm trying to find me a job that I can get that type of wage increase. And you can see a lot of these people have come in with negative wealth and now are worth millions of dollars. So just, it's a very, very lucrative type job. We have an inattention to government. A lot of people don't know who their representatives are. Even less can name both senators from their state. So I'm going to leave that to you guys to do, to make sure you find out who your representative is and who the two senators are. If we look at elites as constituents, usually, areas of the country will have different types of industry attached to it. So if we look at New England, it's going to be fishing, lumber, insurance. The agricultural will exist kind of in the Midwest. Southwest will be oil and ranching, and in the mountain states, tourism, mining, and so on. Now, when we talk about representation here, right? Now, kind of the whole concept of representation of Congress is that these members of Congress are supposed to represent us in Washington, D.C. Now, when we talked about interest groups, we kind of saw that really doesn't happen. Sometimes representatives and senators will work on casework that might perhaps make them look good in their district, or maybe look like they're trying to accomplish something. Or they might put an example of pork into a bill where that is a specific bill that you tailor to benefit your own interest. You craft a bill and you say, okay, well, I need a new military base. Let me put it in San Diego. I represent San Diego. I want them to get the economic boom out of it. That's an example of pork, right? Earmarks are, specific bills that are specific funds that are allocated to a certain project. And fundraising, where you'd go into your district and you raise funds for your re-election campaigns. Now, another thing is, we've kind of have a disrespect, or maybe a lack of respect for Congress. Kind of the implication of representative democracy, that is, that we're not happy with our representatives, we can vote them out. Yet, incumbents win 90% of the time in the House and win about 75% of the time in the Senate. Most voters approve of their own representative, yet they approve of Congress as a whole, which is a really telling statistic. Now, why do incumbents win a lot of the times? They usually get the heavy campaign contributions. Remember, interest groups are going to want to give money, and PACs are going to want to give money to people that are going to win. And usually that'll be the incumbent, right? They have the resources of their office. They have earmarking privileges. And more importantly, they have that name familiarity. But should we do term limits? A term limit is another kind of an argument that goes out with regards to Congress. Congress is the only elected office that doesn't have term limits to it. Citizens' legislature has largely been replaced by those career politicians, Nancy Pelosi in the House, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell in the Senate. Those type of people that we constantly see getting reelected. If we had term limits, that would kind of increase competition in the electoral system. And also would encourage more people to seek public office. Now, if we talk about opponents to term limits would infringe on freedom of choice. We could simply vote them out, and it also is going to reduce experience level in Congress. And I think that's another important thing that you need. Now, let's talk a little bit about the legislative process, right? So, let's talk about how a bill becomes a law. First of all, how do you start a law? And we're going to look at a handout or a form. I mean a graphic that I have here. So we look at this, right? Remember, in order to start the legislative process is always started by an idea, right? So who can give an idea to Congress? It could be a House of Representative member, it could be a senator, or it could be a citizen, right? One thing though is the president cannot sponsor a bill. That's the only thing that we need to kind of get into understanding that. Now, they can be in somebody's ear and try to influence them to pass a bill, but for the most part, they can't sponsor a bill in Congress. A bill has to be sponsored by either a senator or a House of Representative member. We're going to start in the House of Representative member, on the House of Representative side first. Okay, so say for instance, we want to try to make it a law that we're going to allocate a certain amount of money to fight infectious diseases, which is, a really common thing right now, or really kind of in the news type of thing. So what would happen was, as a member of say you have that as an idea as a citizen, and then you come up to me and ask me as a member of Congress to sponsor that bill, what I'll do is I'll introduce it in the House, right? And then it's going to be assigned to a committee, right? And if we follow the flow chart on the right, it goes into a committee, right? The committee that's responsible for that industry or that area of law will be the ones that argue it. There could be anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20 members of a committee. And all you need is a majority vote to pass it along, right? So what will happen is the committees will meet, then they'll vote on whether or not to advance the bill to the floor for a full discussion. Or they can always vote to not pass it to the floor, and then the whole process will start again. So if it is approved, then it goes to the floor, and the floor has a vote and amendments and discussions. And if there's any amendments, then the whole process has to start over again, right? So say, for instance, we get through the House of Representatives. We have a yes vote by a majority of the members. Then it'll go to the Senate. The Senate will then, be introduced by... it will be introduced to the Senate. Then a committee will need to determine whether or not they're going to advance that bill. If not, the bill dies, right? If it is affirmative vote, then it goes to the floor, and then the floor can decide whether or not they want to approve it or not. So, say for instance, if we look at the bill that was put into place, the $2 trillion bill that was put into place to act as kind of a stimulus package during the coronavirus outbreak. It was introduced in the Senate. The Senate Appropriations Committee and Finance Committees met on this, and then they passed it to the Senate, which passed on a 96-0 vote. Right? Now, what'll happen after that is it'll go through the House. The House will need to approve it. If they get an affirmative vote, then it'll go to the president, and the president will need to sign it. If he doesn't sign it, he can veto it, and we all know that kind of checks and balances part. So that's basically the bill procedure, like how a bill. Inside this slideshow, we'll have like the committees that are important, the kind of that second step that we talked about, and what they're doing. The chair of the committees are very powerful as they determine what bills that will be considered, and they can kind of act as the gatekeeper of bills, and they can keep things out, but they can also let things in. One thing that I want you guys to understand is the concept of filibustering. Remember, filibustering will only operate in the Senate, and there's going to be a video attached to this module that I'm going to want you guys to watch about the filibuster. What a filibuster is somebody can talk a bill to death, right? And you just talk and talk and talk. What'll happen is in the Senate, at the beginning of arguments, the Senate will set up a certain amount of time for the bill to be argued. So we could say, for instance, that if we have a bill that's out here and we want to argue it for 2 days, in order to stop debate, you have to have 60 members of Congress agree to stop debate, right? If you don't stop debate and the debate keeps going until that time limit is expired, then the bill dies. And that's kind of the whole strategic purpose of a filibuster is once that time is set up, a senator can conceivably stand in front of the Senate and speak and speak and speak, trying to use up as much time as they can, trying to effectively kill that bill, right? I'm going to test the video. I'm going to want you guys to watch that video, all right? So there is just the House leadership that I'm going to want you guys to look at, the Senate leadership. The Speaker of the House, which is Nancy Pelosi, is elected by the majority party in the House, appoints people to committees, refers bills to committees, third in line for the presidency. Floor leaders and whips, both sides will have them. The Democrats will have them. The Republicans will have them. They are kind of the ones that make sure people practice party discipline, right? That you don't go outside of what your party wants you to do. Kind of like the Kevin Spacey role in the first season of House of Cards. He was the Democratic whip. If we look at the Senate leadership is the vice president is the president of the Senate. If the vice president isn't there, the majority party will elect a person who will preside in his absence, and that is the president pro tem. And then we have the majority leaders and the minority leaders. The majority leader currently is Mitch McConnell, and the minority leader is currently Chuck Schumer. So, we've talked a little bit about this, and we've had polarizations. We talked about impeachment. I don't think we need to go over that anymore. Real quick, the California legislature is a little bit kind of similar to what we have in the United States level, at the federal level. At the state level, we have the assembly, which is made up of 80 districts, 80 assembly people, and then we have senators that are California senators, and there are 40 of them. So we have 80 in the assembly and 40 in the Senate here in the California legislature, and so we have 120 people working up in Sacramento for us, and the bills are basically passed the same way. So there's a kind of a thing in here about gerrymandering that I'm going to want you guys to take a look at. Gerrymandering is the intentional manipulation of boundaries as to favor one party or class. The term came out in 1812 when Governor Gerry of Massachusetts redistricted Massachusetts in order to benefit the Democratic Republicans. When he contorted one district in Boston, it was said to resemble a salamander, so that's where they get the term gerrymandering from. All right. Here in California, we have a group called Who Draws the Lines. They are a 14-member independent commission that was created by Direct Democracy in 2008. And these people are supposed to be an independent commission that tries to draw in and put out population lines as nearly as practical as possible. Right? They have to make a good faith effort in order to draw the lines, to be fair. All right. So just little things that I wanted you guys to kind of be aware of. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and tie up this part of the book. So keep an eye out for more videos, and we will talk to you soon.